All right, so are you ready to dive into this whole Bitcoin versus altcoins thing? Because we're about to unpack this YouTube essay, Why Altcoin Traders, Shipcoiners, Don't Understand Bitcoin, and see if we can get to the bottom of it.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. So the video starts out with the creator, Matthew, addressing a comment from a viewer. And this commenter is basically saying, hey, Bitcoin hasn't done that well. I would have been better off in tech stocks since 2021.
Yeah, I saw that.
So how does Matthew respond to that? Because it's a pretty common sentiment, right? People looking back and thinking, oh, I missed the boat.
Yeah, and it's easy to fall into that trap of hindsight bias, you know? It's like looking back after a game and saying, oh, the winning team was obviously the better team. But in the moment, it wasn't so clear, right?
Totally. You don't know how it's going to play out.
Exactly. And Matthew uses this great example to illustrate it. He says, imagine someone who just consistently put $10 a week into Bitcoin since late 2021.
Okay, interesting. So even starting at what some people might consider a bad time.
Right, even then.
Because late 2021, that's not exactly when everyone was screaming, buy the dip.
Exactly. But even starting then with that steady approach, you know, dollar cost averaging, they'd actually be up over 100% in purchasing power.
Wow. So it really highlights the power of playing the long game, especially with something as volatile as crypto.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we're starting to see that long-term thinking is important here. But then Matthew goes on to say that this is even more crucial because Bitcoin isn't your typical tech stock.
Yeah.
He uses this term bearer asset, and I have to admit I wasn't 100% sure what he meant by that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a jargony term, but it basically means that if you control the private keys to your Bitcoin, then you are the sole owner. No bank, no broker, no government can take that away from you.
Oh, okay, so it's like the difference between having physical gold bars locked in your safe versus just having a stock certificate that says you own a tiny fraction of a gold mining company.
Exactly. One is a lot more tangible.
Right. It's in your control.
And that has some major implications. For one, companies can dilute the value of your stock by issuing more shares.
Right. It's like slicing the same pie into more and more pieces.
Exactly. But Bitcoin, on the other hand, has a fixed supply, 21 million coins, ever. That's it.
Which is just such a mind-blowing concept when you think about it, because governments can just print more money whenever they want. But with Bitcoin, that's literally impossible.
It's baked right into the code.
And that makes it interesting, not just as an investment, but as a potential hedge against inflation, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, so this fixed supply thing, it really sets Bitcoin apart. But Matthew doesn't stop there. He goes on to compare Bitcoin with altcoins.
Yeah.
And let's just say he doesn't hold back.
He does not mince words.
No, he calls them shipcoins at one point, like they're all going to sink.
Yeah, well, he's responding to this commenter who's super bullish on this altcoin called Caspa. And this person's like, hey, I've made bank, why even bother with Bitcoin?
And Matthew's response is basically, hold my beer.
Yeah, basically. And, you know, he doesn't just dismiss the commenter. He lays out these arguments for why the structure of a lot of altcoins, it kind of looks like a pyramid scheme.
Ooh, that's a loaded term, especially in the crypto world.
It is, but he backs it up. He points out that Bitcoin had no pre-minezyme, meaning the creators didn't just give themselves a huge chunk of the currency right off the bat.
Which is something you see with a lot of altcoins, right?
Exactly. And that raises some red flags. Because if a small group controls most of the currency from the beginning, they can manipulate the market, cash out when the price is high, and leave everyone else holding the bag.
Right. It's like the opposite of a level playing field.
And then Matthew hits on another crucial difference. Bitcoin is decentralized. No single person or company controls it.
Which is something we take for granted with traditional currencies, right? Like the Federal Reserve controls the dollar.
Exactly. But with Bitcoin, it's different. And this makes it much harder to censor or manipulate. Many altcoins, though, they're controlled by a small group or even a single company. So it's less about the technology itself, because a lot of altcoins use similar tech to Bitcoin. It's more about the structure and the distribution of power.
So it seems like for Matthew, it's not just about the price of Bitcoin going up.
Yeah.
He sees it as this bigger thing, this potential for changing how we think about money and power.
Absolutely. He highlights some really interesting use cases. For example, remittances, people using Bitcoin to send money across borders without having to go through those traditional systems that can take a huge cut.
Yeah, those fees can be killer.
And this is already having a real impact in countries with high remittance flows. So it's not just about, you know, tech bros trying to get rich quick.
It's interesting that he brings up remittances, because that seems to tie into this idea of Bitcoin giving people more control over their own money, especially in parts of the world where traditional financial systems aren't really working.
Exactly. It's about financial empowerment, and that's a powerful idea.
So it's not just about dodging those Western Union fees then.
No, not at all. There's this whole other side of it that Matthew gets into about Bitcoin and energy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like energy management. It's kind of complicated, but basically some people are saying that Bitcoin mining could actually incentivize renewable energy production.
Okay, now my brain is a little bit broken. Hold on. So Bitcoin mining is often criticized for using a ton of energy, but now you're saying it could actually be good for renewable energy.
It's about using excess energy that might otherwise go to waste. Like imagine a solar farm that's generating more power than the grid can handle at a certain time. Instead of just shutting down those panels, they could use that excess energy for Bitcoin mining.
Huh. So it's like Bitcoin mining could create a financial incentive to build more renewable energy infrastructure.
Exactly. And that's part of what Matthew's getting at here. He sees Bitcoin as this potential driver of innovation, not just a way to make a quick buck.
Yeah, it's like he's painting this picture of Bitcoin as something much bigger than just a digital currency.
Totally. And he also talks about how Bitcoin can offer a level playing field, especially in countries with unstable currencies or limited access to traditional banking.
Which kind of goes back to that idea of financial empowerment, right?
Yeah, right. It's about individuals having more control over their own financial lives, which can be a really powerful thing in certain parts of the world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, its potential role in energy management, and even its impact on financial inclusion. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. And, whether you agree with everything Matthew says or not, you have to admit he raises some really interesting points.
He does. It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key takeaway for our listeners, right?
Absolutely. Don't just follow the hype, whether it's Bitcoin or the latest altcoin promising the moon. Do your own research, understand the risks, and figure out if any of this aligns with your own financial goals.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, folks, that's another deep dive in the books. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next episode where we'll be tackling another thought-provoking topic in the world of crypto. Until then, keep those brains buzzing,